know what you're thinking. Lovely thing, right? Not me so much, but this machine. And it really is something that we should take a bit of time over and enjoy and find out a little bit about. So what are we looking at? This is an MSS, is the model designation, Velocette, produced, I think I'm right, somewhere starting about 1935 and running through to early post-war, or even up to about 48 perhaps. This machine is it's a 1940, but there weren't very many changes until the new all aluminium MSS came in the early 50s. So the 30s for the Velocette factory in Birmingham, England, was a great time. They were rich, relatively rich. Their business was going well. They were having all kinds of racing successes with their KTTs, and in the early 30s it was decided that they would produce some special racing machines, almost what you might call GP races, really works races if you like, and we're lucky enough to be able to look at some of them a bit later. But it was also deemed necessary to produce a machine that was a little bit easier to produce and that could be put together in the factory by, let's say, not so much less skilled workers, but something that was more rudimentary. Because prior to this, and I'm not really going back into the very early Velocettes, but anything that begins with a K, which is the designation is camshaft, that's really could be a German spelling, and of course the Goodmans or Gutmans were of course German originally. It was decided that a pushrod engine would be produced, predominantly for sale as road machines, and so a lot of design effort and engineering was put into these machines in the early 30s. And there's lots of features on this bike which are well worth looking at. And not only that, it's just such a stately thing. I mean, this was really a gentleman's mount, the kind of machine, if you were interested in quality, you were interested in enough performance to be, up front. This was, you might say this was a grand tourer, and a wonderful thing. I mean, a heavy motorbike by today's standards, and really a very vintage motorcycle by today's standards. But I mean, I don't know whether I can show enough enthusiasm for this thing. Let's start with the frame. And the frame was produced and also used on the racing machines from this period. A lot of design effort went into this thing. I mean, we're talking about tubes like a bicycle, where they're all sweated together into cast lugs. So much effort. So we're talking pre any kind of structural fusion welding. So it's all socketed, and so much effort for pattern making and machining. Every single junction had to be thought about. And these machines, unlike virtually any other British bike from the time, and we'll see examples of this in other parts of it as well, they were thoroughly right. And there are lugs on this 1930s design that were still in use when the factory closed in, I think, 1971 perhaps, 70, 71. You know, that's really quite something. So let's look at some of the features of the MSS Velocette. You can see that it's a rigid rear end, girder front end, fishtail exhaust. Look at this wonderful large kind of gate-like rear stand, and that is, you know, that allows the whole back wheel to come off the ground. Quite a big piece of engineering for a stand, and there's also one at the front as well. And you notice the big fireman's helmet, front mud guard. I mean, it was, you got to appreciate that in the 30s, getting a flat tyre was a big deal, and it was more than likely going to happen to you sooner or later, and probably sooner and more often than we ever think about now. So getting access to change the wheels was a big thing. And of course, another nice feature of Velocette's right from the early days was a quick release or semi-quick release rear wheel, so you could get the wheel off without interfering with the drive. Yeah. So we've got a 4-speed gearbox, positive stop, separate oil tank. I mean, yeah, very nice. All iron motor. Now there's a great backstory with this bike. This one in particular is can you believe, unrestored. This has never been tarted up. It's always just been kept, and it's been kept nice. And this was brought to New Zealand. It was ordered by a gentleman living in Darfield in the South Island. Specifically, not very many 500s came to New Zealand. Many Macs came here, and a lesser number of MOVs, but very few MSSs. So this was ordered in 1940, taken home, ridden to a degree, and then the gentleman was called to war and brought the motorbike inside. Unfortunately did not come back home. The motorbike was left inside, and it wasn't until I think it might have even been as late as the 80s where this machine came to light, and the widow released it, and it came into the hands of a few vintage enthusiasts. And I remember seeing it as a much younger man, and I'll be honest, coveting it to a degree. And it was later that it came up at auction, and I was lucky enough to, well, I remembered it very well, and I knew some of the backstory. So the mileage on this thing is 27, nearly 28,000, which I believe is correct, and it's very nice to go over something closely which is as original as this. And I mean, I just love the fact that, you know, there's never been any repainting done on any of the mudguards, and yet it's been loved and polished to the point where it's nearly through to the metal. And of course, Velocette had one of the best paint finishes with an in-house paint shop of all of the manufacturers. They were very proud of that fact, and always had this most lovely gold pinstripe, which was hand applied, was very iconic. Look to it. What else have we got? We've got the lovely sprung single seat, the pound of butter style pillion seat, the toolbox, which would allow you to take spare spark plugs and what have you, because if you own a Velocette or any British bike, you're going to need some tools sooner or later. Yeah, what else? I think it's a 96mm stroke. I think these might be an 81mm bore. A pushrod engine, the biggest in the field. Nice and lazy. Big flywheel. We better take it for a ride. How about that? It's like a male voice choir singing Handel's Messiah at full noise. Glorious, glorious, glorious. The MSS Velocette. What a wonderful thing.